Annie, do we have everyone settled in here?
Oh, yes. Okay, I just got the notice. I'm good to start. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. I hope traffic wasn't too bad. That's my one Zoom joke for the conference. You get it up front. So yes, thank you so much for being here. I want to welcome you to the Preventive Controls portion of the NECAFS 5th Annual Conference. I also wanted to take a minute and thank Elizabeth Nobold for doing so much work in putting this together. It was a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of Zoom meetings, and she's done a fantastic job. I also wanted to thank Perform Media, especially Lindsay Hadfield, for all of the hard work behind the scenes, putting everything together and running all over the back end. It's been a huge help and it's made things really smooth. For folks who I haven't met, my name is Annie Fitzgerald. I started in October of 2020, and I am a research specialist for NECAFS. I don't have a background in food safety. This is my first foray into this world, and so I wanted to thank everyone who has welcomed me into it and who has helped me learn so much along the way, especially with this meeting. I'm really excited to learn a lot more and just help explore this world of preventive controls a bit. I think we're going to get a lot done at this meeting, and I'm really excited for the progress we'll make in advancing preventive controls and helping the working group to best serve its stakeholders. So we're going to start with one second. There we go. We're starting with an FSPCA update until 10:35, and then we'll have an FDA update where we're going to hear from Laura Holmquist and have a Q&A afterwards. Then at 11:05, we'll move on to Andrea Gilbert, who will be reporting on the needs assessment findings. You'll automatically be moved from room to room, so don't worry about leaving and coming back. If you do want to leave and come back, you can certainly join us again from the schedule. After that, you're invited to join the virtual live poster session. Select the poster hall tab. I have a poster, come say hi to me. And you can speak with presenters. So we'll be breaking for lunch after that, and we'll come back at 1, where Nicole Richard will give a review of PC subgroup goals. Then, if you're not sick of me, I will also be presenting along with Beth Demings on the resources subgroup. For the resources subgroup, we're going to have a breakout. I'm really excited to get everyone's feedback and their thoughts, so please join us for that as well. You'll automatically be directed to the breakout room and then back again, so it should be a pretty smooth process and a really good chance for collaboration. After that, we're going to wrap up the day with FSOP funding development discussion and then some light networking afterwards. Thank you all so much for being here. We've got a really great day ahead, and I really appreciate everyone giving their time and giving their ideas to help create a group that has really been welcoming, first of all, but a group that really thrives. So to get things started this morning, we've got a general FSPCA update from Melanie O'Neill. Melanie is Senior Manager of QA Compliance and Training at Rutgers University Food Innovation Center. We're going to have a Q&A session after the general update and the curriculum update, so if folks want to hold questions until that time, that'd be great. Melanie?
Hi, everybody. So I know you are all very disappointed. This is actually supposed to be Donna Schaffner's update that she does every year. But she actually just had hip surgery on the 15th. So she's doing well. She's up and, believe it or not, walking. But she's all settled in, so she's done well. And she's very sad that she's missing this. Okay, let me find my... am I doing the training metrics also along with the FSPCA updates? All at one time?
I think so.
Okay. All right. So we will do this one first. Here, give me a second. Come on. Okay. So Gerald Toja and Donna and I just met very quickly on the new things that are coming down the line with the FSPCA Alliance. So these are just, they had a meeting, I think last week or a couple weeks ago. So they asked me to update, which is what Donna usually does every year. So they gave the green light to do a virtual lead instructor course for the human food and intentional adulteration. So that will be being posted on the website soon. They're going to have a mandatory lead instructor refresher course online for, bear with me if I have any notes on that one. I don't have any notes on that one. And then now they're going to do some new online courses. So they're looking to add, other than what they normally do for the FSPA classes, they're also going to look at some other new online courses. This number 4, I'm most excited about. I thought this was really neat. So they're going to have a bookstore update in Amazon orders. So instead of us as instructors either getting the books, us sending them out, or the FB Alliance sending them out. So sorry, I'm in a cubicle area here. They're going to be able to send the link to the books to get printed by the local printer, and then the person will be able to pick it up from the local your local printer. Because right now we either send it by electronic, like through the web, but I don't know about you guys, but students are not liking not having that book. So we have found, but shipping's expensive. So I think this is a great idea where they can either, the Alliance is either going to link through Amazon or a person's local bookstore or a printer to have it printed, which is really great. Instructor skills training for lead instructors. They feel it's value added. It's optional at this point, and they're going to be standalone courses. And it's going to be held virtual by the FSPCA. So just let you know that that's coming. Room to Zoom training. So they're thinking about doing 4-hour virtual trainings. They're just looking for ideas. They may have they may hire a third party to do these. We don't have a lot of detail on that, but some to help instructors and skills, because there can be some really bad instructors out there on teaching all these things. So you might have the information, but they want to teach, have skills for the lead instructors. The participant course delivery. This is just very interesting, is they might actually start teaching the classes themselves as the FSPCA, from what I understand. So we'll see how that goes. They're thinking about doing, and I know this was some debate at one time, actually making the PCQI a credentialed. So instead of having a certificate, it would be a certification by taking a test. I know there's been some debate. I know Donna and I already do that, as we already give it as our requirement, but so they're thinking about doing that. The IAVA intentional donation online course bundle discounts. I think this has to do with, because there's 3 or 4 classes you have to take for the IAVA, you have to take some prerequisites in order to get the certificate course. So think about bundling that. So that's coming down the line. Enterprise licensing of the FSPCA courses. So what they're thinking about doing is pairing with SCORM Cloud. I don't know if anybody's heard of SCORM, SCORM Cloud. It can be used with other LMS systems within companies' user data, because usually a lot of these, you can't get into the server of the companies. So they're going to have it's a web-based online e-learning tool. I don't know if you want to look more into that, but that's what they're thinking about doing for the enterprise licensing of that. They're thinking about having the lead instructor webinar series. They didn't really have any more. Oh, I'm sorry, they do here. So they're thinking about having FDA speakers, different technical topics, short and more often, for instructor tips and training. They want to have it about 2 hours, and maybe have a subscription style. Maybe you pay a yearly subscription, and then you have access to different types of learning webinars and technical specialties from FDA or subject matter experts, those kind of things. Obviously, we know there's always going to be curricula updates for human food, animal food, and FSBP. So they're working on the updates. And then 13 links in with 12. They're going to have optional participant refresher courses on the curricula updates. So they link together. Optional participant refresher course face-to-face. I do not have an update on that one. It is that basically what it is. They're going to do it, obviously, when we become open again, which I know most of us, as lead instructors, I cannot wait to do face-to-face. I miss people's faces. It's a lot harder to teach online than it is face-to-face. 15, it's independent organization recognitions. So this is more has to do with the international concept to teach lead instructor courses internationally. So if you have questions on any of these, please write them down or email me, or I don't know if anybody's going to take notes. And if you do have questions on what these are, I can reach out to Gerald and or Donna about more specific on what these all mean. 16 is just new teaching examples. They want a lot more different types than what is in the, it's loud here today. They want more teaching examples than what's out there to show a variety of different industries. So they're talking about the breakouts and the exercises that are on the website. They want to have international ambassadors. They're specifically talking about China and India. For the FSPCA and the lead instructors to help teach these regulations in these other countries. And then 18, they want to have, right now, they're having trouble having translations from other languages, specifically Chinese, for a direct translation. So they're working on it, but they don't have anybody to really review and the accuracy of this information. So they're working on translations, but yeah, they're having trouble getting someone to make sure it's accurate and it makes sense. Okay, so that is the new product development that the FSPCA is working on. So like I said, if you have any questions, I can't really answer them at this time, but if you want to write them down, we will get to the right person. Okay, now let me go to okay, so to my view. This is the yearly update that Donna gives on the trainings as a whole, internationally, domestically, with the IAVA, PCHF, FSPP. So this is just the data, the yearly data on how much we've trained, the certificates we've given out per country. Yes.
The screen share is still on your product development slide. Sorry, the product. Yep.
Okay.
And now
let me stop sharing and then reshare.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that better?
That is better.
Okay. I guess it didn't like going from program to program. Okay, so yes, this is the cumulative data for certificates, lead instructors, basically domestic, international, and it gives some charts on how we're trending. As you can tell with human food, we have given out 108,000 certificates in the year 2020. Domestically 63, internationally 44. I'm not going to go through all these details, but you can see lead instructor courses. We know the certificate classes dwindled down this past year. So total participants registered was 10,000. So the upcoming, obviously it's only February, so that's upcoming registrant is lower. I don't know about you guys, but I get a lot of boom at the end of the year where everyone wants to try to get in. So our last 3 classes that we gave in November, December were like 20 people, which we were really surprised for 2 of us. This is how many people completed it, the average class size. I found our average class sizes were about 9 to 10 for Donna and I. And then lead instructor courses completed are here, and the upcoming, obviously looks like there's no lead instructor courses scheduled as of this time when this report was given in January. The blended classes, so enrolled in part 1 is 3,500, domestic and international, obviously a lot more domestic. These are the numbers for the parts 1s, parts 2s, and the part 2 completed. And I can give these out, obviously these slides out. I don't think they're proprietary or anything. So this is the trends with the certificates by month for PCQI. Obviously we know back in 16 was the boom when the regulation was implemented. And it's just a steady decline just because I think that everyone's getting certificates. So, but it's not, I don't think it's doing too bad, but obviously we know it'll trend down over time. So this is the, let me see, so this is the total. This is the domestic numbers. So out of the numbers here, thousands, around 1,000 every year for the past, ever since COVID hit on average. And then looks like half of that was a domestic from what that line is. And then the international trend, obviously if it's half, this is the other half for the numbers. So human food lead instructors by country, obviously the US is the lead, but we can see the numbers in the other countries, which I think is fabulous that all these people want to import into the US, have to follow us, so there's lead instructors on how to do that. So if we look at the numbers by country, as you can see, China is here as 107, Mexico looks like in second for 80. And then there's 2 pages of these. Okay, so we've got 2,000 total. And then here's Germany, India. I think these are the 2 countries why Gerald had stressed about having ambassadors for, because the numbers are pretty high of lead instructors for these countries. Okay. So this is human food PCQI certificates by country. Obviously the US with 63,000, almost 64. And then we're over here. So India, you can see how much over here. Okay. PCQI certificates by country. So this is not the lead instructor, this is the certificates itself. China, again, up there along with where India is 1,800, okay. And then the human food courses by country. So this is all the, again, the certificates of where, I don't know what the numbers were last year, but it looks like we're spreading out, which I think is great. Okay. So human food registered courses by country. So at the US it's 4,809 at the highest. Canada is 300, Mexico 500. Again, Italy's at 400. I think we're doing pretty good. So still there. And then we've got the animal food statistics here. So 10,000 certificates issued, lead instructors, obviously is a lot lower. The registrations, upcoming, average size classes. Now it's very interesting that their class sizes are a little higher than the human food. And I personally think because there's less classes, maybe. I'm not quite sure why. Okay. Here's the blended part 1, part 2 certificates. And then we go down into the current GMPs for animal food production. Okay, their course completions, they're enrolled. Okay, so then here's the numbers for total. So it's very interesting how it went. I'm sorry if there's a lot of background noise you can't hear. I'm sorry. Is it distracting? It is distracting.
It's a little loud. Yeah. That's all right. But okay. Just keep walking through. So we've gone from 500, you noticed, in March of 17, and we're just under 100 here as a total. So FSPP, the same statistics, certificates, lead instructors, and then we're going down to the completed, and then lead instructor courses. Obviously, there's none as of January 5th. Their average class size was 10. This is what we have found with most of our classes. Okay. And then the FSBP blended courses. I haven't found a lot of people who have split them up and done blended. We've noticed that they mainly do it. It's just a 2-day course. So, so here's the numbers for those. And then in total, it's about 100. It looks like on average
since COVID hit. Looks like there was a boom in May here. Okay, and the cumulative data for IAVA. Obviously, we know this got implemented. We just got approval to do trials, so we had a pretty successful enrollment class when we held ours this year. But the average class size is 11, as we see here. All right, and then certificates by trend. Obviously, this just got implemented. So as of April of 19, we were down at 13, had a boom in May. And then we had a real big boom in February. And obviously, we know COVID hit, so we went way down. And then once we got the approvals to do virtual here, you can see there's another boom in there for the IAVA class. All right. So for the food defense intentional adulteration, number of times accessed 148,000, which I think is very interesting. 928,000 minutes were spent. The overview of the intentional adulteration view, number of times accessed was 42,000, 313,000 minutes spent. And then the food defense awareness in Spanish was accessed 2,800 times and 13,000 minutes spent. So it's very interesting to see how long everyone is spending on that. The key activity types, so there was 2,274 enrolled, 51 people did not start, 20 are in progress, and 2,200 completed it. It'd be interesting to know why they didn't complete it. So how many, this might be 138 days were spent, 13 hours, 52 minutes. It's very interesting. And then the mitigation strategies, which is, it's very interesting that there's three parts that you have to do in order to, it's very intense. I don't know how many completed it, but it's a very intense, a lot of data to learn in these. And then enrolled was 2,000, not started 95, in progress 38, and completed 239 days average spent time. I am assuming this is because people left and came back, I would assume, and just leaving it idle there. And then the food defense plan preparation and reanalysis course, 687 enrolled, not started 53, in progress 15, and 71 days average spent, or total time spent. It's very interesting to see the time frame in that. And that is the update. Hopefully it was beneficial and hopefully you learned a lot. All right.
That was great. Thank you so much, Melanie.
All right.
Just a reminder, folks can put questions in the chat and then we'll save those till the end. But right now we're going to hear from Martin Bucknavage on the FSPCA curriculum update. Martin is a Senior Food Safety Extension Associate with Penn State Extension, and please join me in welcoming him, although muted, of course.
All right. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
All right, perfect. Good morning. My name is Martin Bucknavage. I'm, as she mentioned, the Senior Food Safety Extension Associate with Penn State University. I don't know many of you, so just a little bit about myself. I've been at Penn State for 14 years. I work with our team doing training like the FSPCA. Since the start of that, we've done close to over 40 classes for FSPCA. We've got probably close to 1,000 participants that have attended our classes. In fact, we're still doing face-to-face classes. We did some face-to-face classes at the end of the year, at the end of the calendar year last year. And we are planning to do some classes here coming up, following all of the protocols that are needed for COVID. But they've gone well, and I think the participants who come, are interested to come back and sit in a live class and have that interaction. Although there are some limitations, of course, in terms of interaction. But we've kind of worked through it, and again, I think that a lot of the participants are pretty happy. So we've got some courses scheduled coming up here. In later here in the spring. As far as a little bit more about myself, I've again at Penn State for 14 years. Prior to that, I worked in the industry, and currently I sit on the FSPCA Executive Advisory Board. And with that, I've been appointed to be the group leader for the preventive controls for human foods update that we're going to do, and that's what we're going to talk about today. we're going to go through and just talk about some of the changes, why we're making the changes, how we're going to do them, and there's sort of a list of go through them. So I'll go through this pretty quickly so that I don't, we don't get bogged down. If you have any questions, feel free, if somebody could, watch the things, and we can certainly answer it and make it a little bit more interactive. So one of the things we realized is the fact that, of course, like anything, we have to make sure that we're constantly improving the curriculum that we have. And so what we've done is we've gone through as the executive advisory board. We've had some meetings. We've collected notes from the various instructor trainings and got together, and we put together a survey. And the survey was all based upon a lot of the things that we wanted to do, but we would have to go through and make sure that we got some good agreement on that. So we put together a survey. We sent the survey out, and then we collected that information. And then we met with our, we've had a couple group meetings with all of the different lead instructors for FSPCA, as well as we met with some of the third-party audit groups, including SQF and BRC. And one of the things that we wanted to do, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but we want to make sure that the training that we have, that we're offering as far as FSPCA goes, is going to be accepted by those third-party audits. And if you guys have done training, you probably know that there's some limitations there in terms of what they'll request. And a lot of that is based on this whole concept of having a HACCP-based training. And so we wanted to make sure that we incorporated those concepts into the curriculum so that training would be accepted. We had a great meeting with them, and we'll talk about some of the proposals that we have here. We spoke with them about that, and they were very acceptive of those solutions. Sorry. So after we went through, we did our survey. We put together work groups. We're going to work together in terms of working on these as various chapters. The goal, of course, is to develop a chapter in PowerPoint, basically, or the presentation component of that, and then develop the materials after that. So that outline, the book is going to be based upon the PowerPoint, which serves as the outline, and so that it comes across in a way that is going to be very conducive to learning the concepts, especially for, a goal of it is to really kind of focus in on the small and mid-sized companies, so that especially companies that may have not had HACCP-based training in the past. And so we want to make sure that we capture some of those concepts. So we're going through, we're looking at the different chapters, and we're going to present that back to the lead instructors at some point to get a wider amount of feedback. And then, of course, we'll go through and create the chapters. One of the things, of course, we want to do is be able to provide, if you were involved, like I was in the initial development of the curriculum, there was a lot of, it was very difficult to get some of the ideas across that a lot of the instructors felt were necessary. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is to have that open so that people can come through and have some say in what gets done there. So as far as the changes goes, of course, there's a number of necessary changes that have to be made to the curriculum. If you go through and you look at the curriculum, there's some of those different charts that we have are outdated. Those have to be updated. Then, of course, we have to make sure that we have any of the updated regulatory documents that are coming out. And of course, this will always pose a challenge because of the fact that we'll see, guidance documents constantly coming out over the next year. So, one of the things we want to do is try to make enough, make the program adaptable so that we can actually, put these changes in there. So, and that's some of the stuff that you have to do, right? The other thing is what we wanted to do is streamline some of the concepts, reduce some of the redundancy. As we start off and you go through the chapters, you see that, we talk about some of the same things over and over again. And we want to get rid of that and try to reduce the amount of redundancy. Not to say that redundancy isn't bad. Sometimes it's good to go through concepts again and again. But I think, as you're going through and you're saying, oh my gosh, I think I said this already. The other thing, of course, is simplifying the concepts. And I think a great chapter that you could think about in terms of this is the supply chain chapter, which is kind of unruly. And what we want to do is kind of limit that down, focus it a little bit more, and to simplify the concepts that are presented in that chapter. As I mentioned earlier, we want to gain acceptance from the third-party organizations. We think this is going to be a big benefit for not only for getting people to come into our classes, into these preventive control classes, but I think it creates a more cohesive approach across the whole industry. So whether it's into third parties or whether you're working with companies, everybody's kind of working at and hearing that same message. As I mentioned before, we want to make it more accessible to small and mid-sized producers. Of course, us and we who work in extension, that's a big focus of what we do, working with the small and mid-sized companies. And we know that the small and mid-sized companies, especially as the FSPA regulation came out, a lot of these companies may have not had to take HACCP before. And so making sure that they have a good understanding of process control and all the elements that go with it is important. There's another bullet point on here that's not on here, I think that we'll just mention briefly, is to really better interface with our international customers. Of course, we know internationally, they basically follow a codex-based HACCP procedure, or codex HACCP curriculum, essentially. And what we want to basically do is, of course, as we go back and we focus in on that HACCP-based training in this, we're also going to be able to better address our international customers or the international people who are taking this. And certainly if you've done some training with, you've had some international folks, you've realized that, they'll ask questions regarding HACCP and, how it relates to what they're doing. And I think it's important for us to be able to draw that in a little bit closer. From our survey that we did, it was pretty interesting. We had about 127 respondents to the survey. We had really high acceptance of all the major points that we made, which was great. When I say 70 were in agreement with the items, there were 70 that were in agreement, and there was probably about 25 who said they didn't care. And oftentimes there's only 5% that said, hey, we want to keep it the way it is. So I think a lot of the items that we've identified really were items that were pretty solid in terms of, what we want to do. The other thing that's important is the fact that in the survey, we were able to collect a lot of comments. And we found that the comments were really some excellent comments in terms of what people experience, in terms of how they do things. And so for us, one of the challenges will be, either incorporate those comments into the curriculum or to understand what those comments are and provide that variability for the instructor to do their own thing within the confines of still providing the curriculum that we want them to provide. And I think this is, it's going to be one of our challenges, but I think it's something that me personally, and I know, I work with, Carrie, who likes to do a lot of, her own thing in terms of the curriculum. It's important for people like that to have that, it gives you a little bit of artistic freedom, right? To have that variability, but still staying within the curriculum, right? Still staying within the confines of what we want to present or the concepts that we want to present. So some of the proposed changes that we're going to have, hopefully you're, if you're not, if you have your book in front of you, you can pull it out. Otherwise, hopefully you're somewhat familiar with some of the different sections here. So in the first section, the preface section, what we're going to do in the preface section, we're going to take all of the stuff that's kind of more class management. We're going to take it out of chapter 1 and a little bit out of chapter 2, and we're going to put it in preface, right? It kind of lays out that this is what the class is about, and this is, what we expect from you as students to sit through the class and all of that. The introduction, what we're doing with that is we're going to combine once we've moved that stuff out, we're going to combine chapters 1 and 2. And I think this is going to provide us, just to streamline that a little bit. And the other thing that we wanted to do is to really build back into this, where this training, where this, the preventive controls kind of originates, which is a HACCP-based training. And, FDA really wanted to, when they wrote the book, they really wanted to have a separation between, HACCP and preventive controls. And, I get that. I understand, what they were trying to do there, but I think a lot of times people still want to make that connection. And especially, as I mentioned earlier, having the international folks to make that connection from a codex-based HACCP, to the preventive controls. And so, not that we're going to spend a lot of time on it, but just to put a little bit in there that we understand that this is really something that has kind of evolved from our traditional HACCP. In the section on GMPs, one of the things that we want to do is to have a better discussion on the GMP regulations themselves. Currently in there's a lot of bullet points that are just kind of, and so the way we're going to hope to design this is to have it where the presentation part of it all links back into the regulation. It's almost impossible to cover all the points in great detail, but if you can go back and if you're reading something and you want to learn more about it, you know exactly where you have to go in that GMP section to find that. So that's one of the things that we're going to be doing. Another thing that we want to do within this section is to not only talk about the GMPs, which this chapter does, and of course that's the regulatory component that companies have to do, but GMPs really are just the standards, right? They form the standards in which companies, the minimum standards in which companies have to operate. But what we want to be able to do then is to show how we take those standards and then we use them in the programs that we have to, the programs that companies will actually have, right? So in the regulation, for example, we'll say, pest control, right? In the GMPs, it'll say, companies have to control pests in their facility. Well, how do you do that? Well, later on, we'll have a section, a page that says, this is what's really included within a pest control program, right? So then, you get the GMPs and then you go through the individual programs, whether that's, pest control, whether that's, traceability systems. And so we can kind of go through and address some of those things. And again, I think this is going to be really critical for the small companies who are coming to this and maybe have been under state inspection and not under FDA inspection and now have to start to develop some of these programs. It will also help them if they start to go through and look at becoming third-party, want to achieve third-party certification so that, we're kind of in sync with those types of programs that are commonly used by companies, right? So the GMPs, again, the standards, these other things, these other programs, all the policies and procedures that really are kind of sit upon those GMPs. And another thing is to talk about to what degree do these programs control hazards? How are they important for controlling hazards? Because I think one of the things that's important to do is to talk about that so that when we come to the hazard analysis, we can start to make that determination of risk based upon whether or not prerequisite programs are going to have any effect on that specific hazard. And I don't think we really do that, or that's not really done to a great degree in the current curriculum. So hopefully we're able to do that to a greater degree. Within the hazard section, the biological, chemical, and physical hazards within chapters of 4 and 5, a couple things that we want to do there. We want to add a few of the microbes in there. Being a microbiologist, man, I just got talk about those microbes. And the other thing, of course, we want to do is talk a little bit more about controls that could be used for not only microbiological hazards, but also, especially more so, for chemical and physical hazards. As we all know, a lot of our chemical and physical hazards are actually controlled by some of these prerequisite programs. And so this would be a great opportunity to talk about how some of those, things like, pesticides or whatever, are controlled by, some of these other programs that exist within the operation. So really providing more of this is what really happens in the real world kind of thing. Within the hazard analysis section, chapter 6, one of the things that I think the biggest thing here is going to be incorporating the hazards guide. I don't know if a lot of you use the hazards guide. We talk about the hazards guide. Hazards guide is kind of interesting because it's kind of like you look up a specific hazard, it's like like a whole category, a whole big mess of different, pathogens and, for a given ingredient, a whole bunch of different pathogens or whatever that could be associated with it. And it's important to have that discussion with students to understand that as you're going through and you're looking at hazards or you're looking at specific ingredients or whatever, that they understand that just because somebody puts a big laundry list of hazards out there not all of them may apply, right? And so how do you go through and make that delineation, right? How do you start to wheedle that down a little bit so that you have something that's a little bit more realistic for your operation? And I think that's one of the things that we need to do within that section. The other thing that we're going to do, and this really goes from all of the preventive control section, is we're going to take the verification section and the record keeping section, and we're going to build that back into the process control section. And so what our goal here is when we're talking about process controls, we're going to go all the way from the start and really cover the 7 principles of HACCP essentially within that section. And I think that's going to be more cohesive. So then after we do that, now we don't have to go through, and we talk about allergen controls and sanitation controls and supply chain controls. We can also then go through all of the different elements there from the monitoring through the record keeping, verification if needed. And in a lot of cases, of course, with those, we don't really need to do validation support. So we can actually do that up with the process controls. And then, when we get to that, say, listen, really you don't need to do validation in part of this. And I think it's going to make each of those elements a lot stronger, whether it's process controls, allergen controls, sanitation controls, or supply chain controls. So I think that's going to be better. And I hope you all agree on that. If not, you can let me know. But so far so good, and I think we've had pretty good alignment on that. Chapter 13, supply chain preventive control chapter. Certainly one of the things that we want to do, as I mentioned earlier, was to streamline this chapter. Really kind of get into the whole discussion of a supplier approval and a supplier maintenance. I mean, both of these, and coming from a supply chain background, supplier approval and supplier maintenance are two important facets that they have similar elements, but they're done differently. And I think we want to make sure that we kind of outline that in a little bit more detail in terms of how do you approve a supplier, how do you maintain a supplier, and again, both elements could be similar, but the level of frequency or the level of in-depthness, I guess, that you go, especially up front, could be a lot more so. Discussion of COA, LOC, letter of continued guarantee, and then letter of conformance. It's unfortunate, but I think, and many of you probably see this as you go through, if when you do class, that a lot of people say, man, COA, how are you going to control the supplier? Well, with a COA. Now, COA gets you so far, but it doesn't get you to the end. So I think we need to have a better discussion in terms of what each of these are, right? Letter of guarantee, right? You should have it from all of your suppliers, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't prevent a whole lot outside the fact that you have that letter to go back and hold that against your supplier. So we want to kind of talk about those in a little bit more detail so that people understand they need to do a little bit more. They need to go a little bit beyond just getting some mail, some letters in the mail. And although it may work for some cases, but especially at the front part of it, when you're doing supplier approval, I think there's some limitations that are there. Chapter 14 here, we're going to go through, is going to be a chapter where we're going to get rid of the verification and the record keeping, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to put those up forward. But it's still, at the end of the day, we still have to come back and talk about, verifying the whole plan, reviewing the whole plan. And then we'll have a chapter on this. It'll be both managing the plan as well as reviewing the plan. We currently do this in HACCP training, but this was not really done, in my opinion, well within this book. And I think certainly having and talking about how these programs are managed over time is important. And then what we can do is build into this the whole concept of verifying the plan, when that needs to be done, every 3 years according to regulation, or when you have significant changes or when new information becomes available. But to have that section there, we could talk about that in more detail. And then finally, the section here on regulation, and we had a lot of discussion in regard to this, whether this section should be up front or should be in the back. And we found that there was about a 50-50 split on where this section falls. Some of us like to do it at the end as a review. Some of us like to do it up front, before we get started. I think the goal here was to have it where that chapter could be done either way. Now, one of the things that we want to do with this specific chapter is kind of strip away a lot of the stuff that we're going to cover within the book. Certainly we can do it as an overview, but to go through every item point by point can be almost killer. It's just horrible to have to sit to listen to that. So one of the things that we want to do is talk about the other components of the FSMA regulations. A lot of these people who are coming in understand, that they're taking preventive controls, and all right, what else do I need to take? Well, they need to be aware about food defense. They need to be aware about sanitary transport. And so these sections, we can talk a little bit about those sections. We can offer, opportunities for them to take some of our other classes, like our food defense class. And Penn State has a sanitary transport class for the FSMA regulation. That's, it's like cheap. You can go and take it, and, for your truck drivers and stuff. So, you can cover that, right in that section, and, it's all good. So again, our things here, of course, satisfy a lot of the requirements by the third-party organizations. Provide feedback to the instructors is another thing that we want to be able to do. Help ensure active engagement with the students. And like, as an example, one of the things that we're going to try to do with this is to have like an instructor guide for each chapter. As we go through and we're developing this, this new manual, sometimes people come into it, maybe they're not overly familiar with a specific section like supply chain management, or a section that we're currently working on, which is the GMP chapter, which has a lot of points in there. And so the guidance that, the sheet may say, listen, hey, there's a lot of different elements within the GMPs. You don't have to feel like you have to cover every element, but a lot of it will depend on the clientele that you have within that section, right? So if you've got people that have worked in the industry for a long time, you're working with a large company, covering the GMPs in detail, people probably know most of that, right? So you just hit a couple major points and call it good. Whereas if you're working with a lot of smaller companies, you probably have to go through some of those points in more detail. So, this chapter guide will be a way for instructors to go through and see what was the intent of this chapter, or what are some different approaches that you can take. Also adding into that some different examples so that the instructor can go and look up at examples that fit that specific, discussion point that's being covered. And we think that that'll go a long way in helping instructors focus in on items that can help the students learn. Appendixes and models is another thing we talked about. We're going to look at how we're going to do that. And I think a lot of that's going to be based upon the book and what the book really requires as we go through and do these chapters. What do we need to see in terms of the appendix? A lot of the appendixes, of course, do need to be updated, but seeing what additional information has to be done there. So, and the other thing, of course, is the models. We talked a little bit about models earlier. One of the things we're going to do is to work with and develop, or have teams to work on developing additional models to help support the information. I know on the the produce processing side, there's a number of different models that are there, but there's not a lot of things for things like acidified foods or cereal or stuff like that. So we want to try to incorporate some of those, have some of those models available. Anyway, so yeah, trying to think this what we did here. Chapter presentation summary. As I just mentioned, that would be that sheet. Again, talking about the verification, what needs to be included, and how to address that within the individual chapters is another thing that's going to be a key discussion point as we go through. Another thing we just mentioned a little bit earlier, and as required by the third-party audit organizations, is an assessment. Now, traditionally, Penn State has done an assessment for HACCP-based training. We currently do not do it for the preventive controls because it was something that the FDA was not overly keen on. So we just didn't. And but one of the things that we're looking at is going back and asking that instructors do that as part of the class. not to make the assessment overly difficult, but to make it to the point where the third-party audits, because that's part of what they require. They require that you cover the 7 principles of HACCP, the 12 points, and they also require some type of assessment. And so by having an assessment there, it makes it easier for them to accept our training. And so why not do it, right? It's pretty easy to do. Have a simple little quiz at the end. The other thing that it does, though, however, is it does provide the instructor information back to them, right? We've done quizzes forever in HACCP, and one of the things that's nice is the fact that at the end of the day, you give a quiz and like everybody misses the same question. Well, maybe that wasn't covered that well. I think the same thing goes here, right? If you have a little quiz, you go through and you see that some people are missing the same thing, it's a good indication that that wasn't covered. So I think that feedback is, it's nice. It's just a great thing to have. It helps the instructor to become a better instructor. And so that's hopefully our selling point to get people to use the quiz. At the end of the day, it really doesn't hurt. It takes 15 minutes and, it's all good. So that is that. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point or how you guys wanted to move forward, but
thanks, Martin.
Be happy to answer any questions.
Great. I'm gonna. So, can you unshare your screen?
I can as soon as I figure out how to do that. Yes.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Kinchela, and I am intervening here as the facilitator for today's discussion. So we have about 10 minutes or so as an open forum for Q&A, and I have a couple questions that are fielded in the chat box that we can invite Melanie and Martin to respond to. So I want to just thank the presenters for taking the time to give us some of these summaries. Okay, so while people, I have 2 questions in the chat box, and I created some myself, but I'm going to ask 2 from the chat, but I would ask if you have a question you want to give a shout out to, use your hand raising feature on the chat feature. But this question first goes to Melanie, and Martin, you might know this question, but will the FSPCA provide any recommended pricing structures for courses in general?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll answer that. No, I think a lot of this really comes, it comes down to the instructor and the different circumstances in which they operate. So, I would, as an advisory board member, I would fight against that. I think it's important for all of us to be able to do what we do. If you think you can do it cheaper, you think your course deserves more money, so that is my take on that. But there's been no discussion in terms of that.
Okay.
I'd be curious to know, is there a concern with that, or is there an opinion that somebody would have regarding that in terms of whether they would want to see standardized pricing or not?
This is Dave.
Yeah.
How are you today?
Hey, good. How you doing?
Good, Martin. Hey, I know that is obviously up to the provider, and there are some benefits when you are able to get subsidized trainings available for people, which I'm all for. So I just sort of see such a wide range of course pricings that I just was curious if that was sort of a concern at all also for the curriculum, because if we're trying to make sure it's affordable and make sure as many people take it, what makes it affordable, what makes it available?
Yeah, I think one of the things, certainly being able to offer class where you can support that operation for that. And so a lot of it comes down to, if your class is subsidized by the government and you want to offer it more cheaper, God bless you, man. Your state legislature, whoever supported that, and you should be able to offer that class cheaper. Here, what we do at Penn State is we try to look at a certain class size and make sure that we can cover that class size based upon the price that we have. And so, if we go, we get a little above it, we make a little money. If we go below that, we lose a little money. And hopefully at the end of the day, we're breaking even. Yeah. That's been kind of our approach. And I think it's important again. And there's people who do stuff internationally, who travel out, who travel all over the place. And certainly when you do that, and that there's going to be some higher expenses that are associated with it. So, I think having the leadway for instructors to really charge what they need to charge is important.
And can I just follow a question real quick?
Yeah.
Is there going to be any issues with the fact that FSPCA will be offering their own courses, and any disparity in other universities who are doing
that's not really a solid thing. I think one of the things they're looking to do, they talked about, especially like the online component of it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's they have the amount of horses to be able to do it, where they're going to come around like some of the third party organizations come to state to state and do that type of training. I just don't see that at any foreseeable future. So I don't think it's something to be overly concerned about,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what Gerald talked about was those subjects, those 15, 16, were just basically talking points of things that got brought up. It may not necessarily go to fruition.
Great. So there's another question here in the chat that was asked is, do you see that the new course updates will include more about food fraud and food defense? You talked about some of that other regulation, Martin, but
that's a great question. So food defense, no, right? So food defense, there's certainly another, curriculum that covers that. And really, of course, it's a different type of thing, right? It's controlling, hazards that we can't really plan for. However, on the other side of the coin, the food fraud component, one of the things that we do want to do within the section is to at least provide resources for somebody to go. Food fraud is certainly an area that's, for here in the United States, not a huge issue, right? We got maybe olive oil or honey or something like that, right? Becomes a bigger thing overseas. And so every country has its own issues. And so it's important for us to be able to provide resources that people can go to, especially in those countries or those areas where maybe there's bigger concerns. But for us to spend a lot of time on that, I think the amount of time that we spend, the risk is not there for us to allocate a lot of time on that. So better to send them to a good source of information.
Thank you. Any other questions from the crowd? Just going to take a moment here and look at the groups here. Any shout outs from the audience? Okay. Melanie, can you talk, I don't know if you can, but maybe Martin again, can you explain a little bit more on your hit list of updates? There was the instructor skills and training for lead instructor. Does this kind of go back to, Martin, some of the stuff that you're talking about with the instructor guides and kind of giving a little bit more meat of context so instructors can be
we've in our meetings, we've talked quite a bit about this to be able to, this is one of the things that we feel FSPA feels that they need to be doing better than they are currently, which is providing kind of ongoing training on specific topics. And, so we were talking about that, how to do that, whether it's webinars, whether it's going to be required for instructors to do it, so some of these things are still up in the air, but certainly there's a lot of interest for that. And I can see that there'll be something in place for that, to have this ongoing training, for lead instructors, whether that will be required or not. Another component is whether, we'll actually go through and establish another system that provides certification for approved instructors, where they can go through and take and become an approved, have a certification in this, we'll take a whole exam and all that. So there's this discussion around that, but the whole thing really here is to really help to elevate the level of the instructors. So when people are going out and they're doing instruction, that, they understand what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. What about the credentials for the PCQI participants and having some sort of assessment tool? Is that going to be something logistically that would be
the same thing on that?
So it wouldn't be retroactive.
The same thing on that is they're looking at whether or not that is worthwhile to have a certification for PCQIs to go to that next level. And of course, that would incorporate an exam that could be used where the instructor would go, or the PCQI can go in, take the exam, and achieve that certification. yeah, so again, it's something that, again, as Melanie said, it's something that they're talking about, but it's, that's my
And is there any proposed timing? All of these things seem like great refinements into the curricula, but I guess a couple questions to that is, one, what's the general timing on this? And two, is there any like beta testing with students to see if these refinements keep the heart of the curriculum?
Absolutely. There's no real time. I shouldn't say there's no time frame. The time frame is, we're currently working on the PowerPoints as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now we're just trying to get a little traction in that. We've worked on a few of the chapters. We're going to continue to do that, and hopefully once we get rolling, we can have this thing done. I'd like to see this thing done. The curriculums, sections done by the beginning of summer here. But then there's the writing that has to go along with it. So we're going to try to fast track that. So as we're doing the chapters, we can hand that off, have somebody go through and do the writing, and have these sections done. That's the goal. But
so maybe like a year. So for the instructors in the room, of thinking of a year plus, probably.
That's what I would think.
The line's recorded, so be careful what you promise.
Yeah, I'm not promising anything. It's a little outside of my hands. I'm just trying to work on the chapter side of it, and there's a lot of things that I don't really do, that I'm not going to be involved with as much on the other side, so I can't really speak to that. These guys who have done the initial curriculum have a lot more experience with that in terms of what it took last time, and probably would be better to answer that question.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. So Amanda, I did want to add that that's one thing Gerald did not talk about was timelines.
Okay, yeah, and just from the instructor for us of how to anticipate a transition with some of these updates.
Yeah, I certainly as an instructor myself, I'm very, very want to be very understanding of the things that have to happen, right? People carry manuals, they have all of this.
Yeah, right.
And so we're going to make sure that as that rolls through, that we're going to be providing that information regularly. And again, I think
the theatrics of my cues and my delivery, if we're shaking it up, I gotta, block out my scene again. Right?
I know. Yeah, it's hopefully, we'll get started here. I think we're all, the groups that we work together, it is, it's tough getting everybody together, but I think once we get a system in place and we start moving, it'll go a little bit better. And, I really hope that we have the opportunity to do these open sessions for each chapter, have an open session, provide the opportunity for people to come in and listen to it. And it does two things, right? It allows you to get some feedback, but it also does further training with the student, with the instructors, to have that sort of that melding of the minds, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have come up against time. I want to thank both speakers again for their insight. And actually, I have more questions, but I'm going to curtail it to the table talk this afternoon. But Martin, you better be prepared, because I'm going to ask how the heck you did face-to-face sessions and got through university approvals. But that's a conversation for another day. Annie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you, Melanie and Martin, as well. Next, we're going to hear from Lori Holmquist. Lori is based in Maine and is director of the investigations branch of the FDA. She'll be providing updates, and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards, so feel free to throw questions into the chat as we go along. Thank you. Lori?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Okay. All right, yes, so I am Lori Holmquist, and I'm the Director of Investigations with FDA, and I have been with the agency since 1990 and been in my current role as Director of Investigations since 2012. I oversee the domestic food operations for the states of New York and the New England states, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Connecticut. This is part of the Office of Human and Animal Food Operations, Division 1 East. And I'll go through this below. I thought giving a general overview of our division structure is important. So I'll go over our program alignment, the OHAFO structure, that's Office of Human and Animal Food Operations, and then give a brief overview of the PC inspections. So in 2017, the Food and Drug Administration Office of Regulatory Affairs went through a organizational restructure. So on May 15, 2017, as part of the broader agency program alignment initiative, the FDA Office of Regulatory Affairs implemented a program-based management structure that aligns staff by FDA regulated products. So that means by foods, by devices, by biologics, and by imports. This organizational approach replaced a management structure based just on geographic regions. So specializing by FDA regulated product type closely mirrored the organization model of our centers. Center for Food Safety and Nutrition, Center for Veterinary Medicine, Center for Biologics and Evaluation, things like that. This was done to enhance the effectiveness of our communications, our processes, and our ability to keep pace with scientific innovation and in protecting the human, the public health. So under the old structure, the old geographic districts were done by, again, geographic. So Baltimore District was Maryland, District of Columbia, Virginia, and West Virginia. The New England District, the old New England District, had all the New England states, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And New York was just New York, and our New Jersey district office was just New Jersey. And then our Philadelphia office, our district office, consisted of Delaware and Pennsylvania. Under the new program division, which is, we put Office of Human and Animal Food, we went into divisions, so we combined some of those district offices. So our division where I am currently located is under the Office of Human and Animal Food, and it's called HAF, Human and Animal Food, East Division 1. And so that includes the old New York district and the New England district. So it includes Massachusetts, Maine, I forgot Connecticut there, I see now, New Hampshire, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And then of course, HAF East 2 combined all the other, combined 3 district offices and includes now Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia. So I thought I would list out, in case you needed information on how to get in touch with us. Here is our management structure. We are now program division directors. Ronald Pace is my director. I report to him. He is the program division director. I'm the director of investigations, and Commander Catherine Beer is the director of compliance. In HAF East 2, we have a new program division director. It was Randy Pack. Before was Evelyn Bonin. The director of investigation is Commander Martin Guardia. And currently at this time, Randy moved from the director of compliance. So currently they have a vacant position in the director of compliance, and they have people in the acting roles. So I was asked to cover, to give a brief overview on, who is conducting FDA inspections, the type of inspections, I thought I'd cover the number of inspections conducted, and then just give a brief overview of inspection coverage. So who conducts our PC inspections, our preventative control inspections? FDA does. We conduct inspections. Our investigators are located in every state and will travel within our division boundaries, but may travel outside of our division boundaries to help with other work. You'll recognize us when we present our credentials and we issue a notice of inspection, and we'll commence the inspection. So what other people may not know is that we do have states who conduct inspections under contract under our behalf. They basically are, we have agreements with them, a statement of work that tells them to do the inspections under our compliance program. They basically conduct the inspections under the same regulatory authority that we have. So states in Half East 1 and Half East 2, all the states have contracts except for Delaware and New Hampshire. At this time, they currently do not have inspection contracts with us. There are two ways in which our states conduct our inspections for us. They either conduct the inspections under their authority. That means that they have adopted those regulations and that they can go in under their authority and go in and inspect firms. The other way is that they have not adopted those regulations and they do it under our credentials. So you may see state inspectors conduct inspections using pocket credentials, so they'll have credentials when they commence the inspection. And but in all cases, I did want to cover training. That we do attend the same training. They do get the same training that we do. They have the same prerequisites. They actually attend training courses side by side with FDA investigators. We go out and we do audits. They, after the training course, they're required to do some on-the-job training with our investigators, and we have an audit program to show that their inspection is essentially equivalent to our inspection. So I thought I'd give an overview of the number of inspections. We have been doing inspections since the time of rollout of the PC rule. Right now, so right now, so these are FY19 and FY20. Our fiscal year, that's fiscal year 19, it covers from October 1 till September 30th, so we're on a different kind of schedule. So in FY19, between the state for Half East 1, we did a total of about 571 inspections, and for Half East 2, we did about 853. In FY20, you see a significant decrease, well, not too bad, but due to the pandemic, FDA was not in the field for a part of that period of time, so we weren't able to do preventative control inspections. Okay, so I thought I would cover the preventative controls. So generally domestic, and you probably all know this, so domestic and food facilities that are required to register under 415 of the FD&C Acts comply with our preventative controls, and here are the subparts that they cover. When FDA investigators come in and do inspections, they generally will, when they announce their inspection and they commence their inspection, typically what is done is they present their credentials. For FDA people, they present their credentials, they issue the 482, and they'll tell you, you know what, I'm here to do a PC inspection, I'm here to follow up under a consumer complaint, I'm here to cover a recall, but they should tell you what the scope of the inspection is. And for state investigators should follow that same protocol, and they should be letting you know, I am here, I am doing a state inspection on behalf of the FDA, it's a contract inspection, and this is what I'm going to cover. So in the cases of PC inspections, there are two types of inspections that we do cover. We do what is called a limited scope inspection. So basically we cover parts A, B, and F. So for training, if we're covering a limited scope inspection, you know, we're looking for, are people trained in food hygiene and food safety as appropriate? Our training records maintained, are the records maintained in accordance with subpart F? So for subpart B, So this subpart B includes human food byproducts for use as animal foods, specific requirements for preventative allergens, cross-contact, and other GMP provisions. And then for subpart S, basically, are we looking, do the records required meet the requirements of subpart F? So again, more of the limited PC inspection. Do we look at sanitation controls, equipment cleaning and sanitizing, as well as employee practices, environmental monitoring program if it's required. We cover the food allergen controls for allergen cross-contact, including employee practices, equipment cleaning between products with different allergen profiles, and dedicated equipment and/or employees for allergen and non-allergen containing products. And is there a physical separation of allergenic ingredients and process scheduling, assessing the facilities, and we assess the facilities control for labeling products containing allergens. For process controls, we assess any process controls that the facility has implemented to control significant hazards. Such controls may include cooking, formulation, pH, water activity, cooling, and refrigeration. So even though we may go in and do a limited scope PC inspection, if during the inspection our review shows that the controls may be inadequate to control significant hazard, some additional staff may be added to the inspection, and we may decide to do a full scope PC. And that would mean covering all aspects of the 21 CFR Part 117. Essentially that would include the hazard analysis conducted by the inspector to determine what controls are needed. We'd cover all the controls, process controls, allergen controls, sanitation controls, supply chain controls, and a recall plan. So essentially so that's essentially all that I had to cover. Basically, who is doing the inspections. We do have contract inspections, and then also, what type of inspections are we doing, and then also the number of inspections that, what is the rollout? It is being done in all of the states. It is being done by FDA investigators, and it is also being done by state inspectors under contract for us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lori. If you wanted to, you've got video either way, or you have your presentation up. So you wanted to pull that down, and we've got a couple of questions in the chat. If anyone wants to add questions, now is your time. We've got a few minutes ahead of us still. So you're all good. The first question.
I didn't know my video wasn't on. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. So the first question I have is, how many unique companies do you visit year over year?
So we visit, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I know specifically for Half East 2, we are required to do about 1,500 inspections a year. But as of course, because of the pandemic, that the number of inspections has reduced significantly. However, as we're getting vaccinated and the states are opening up, we're going full force into the field, once we can get out in the field. But we're trying to, be mindful of COVID and ensuring the safety of our employees and also the facilities to make sure that we're using best practices. But generally about 1,500 inspections between the state and us every year is what we're required to do.
Great. The next question I have, it's, could you share the general process of what happens when you visit a small exempt facility that had filed for an attestation?
So actually, Tom Sieberts is on this call. If you can unmute him, I'll have him cover the qualified facilities part of if he can cover that part.
Yeah, and Tom, I think you should have the ability to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Okay, yeah, so I think what you're talking about is Facilities that would fall under $1 million in sales would be able to file with FDA for as a qualified facility, meaning that they're subject to certain modified requirements under the rule. And generally that would be, they're in compliance with state or local health regulations. And they've also kind of done their own risk assessments and determined that they can follow these modified requirements. But really sort of our approach would be to cover subparts A, B, and F under the regulation. We wouldn't be going into like a full preventive controls inspection at those smaller facilities. And again, our approach is always to educate before we regulate. And, really our goal is always public health.
Thank you. The next question I have, how is risk level of the final food product or in the process play into the inspections?
So, so can they clarify it? Is that if it is a limited scope versus is that what they're talking about? If we can clarify, I don't know who gave that question.
Yeah, Dave, if you want to jump in.
Sure. Yeah, the risk level I was referring to is in relationship to the type of processing or the final product. Let's say it's an RTE type of product versus non. So.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so it would, again, we do it we don't do full PC inspections every time we go out and do an inspection. So, and it's based on assignment, and depending on the the firm's history, we use that a lot. Has the firm been in compliant the last couple of years? Depending on the size of the facility and the risk base, we may do a full PC inspection, but remember, if we go in and we find that we start a limited scope PC, we may turn it into a full PC based on our findings. So risk does play a factor in it, but we may not necessarily do a full PC inspection at that facility. So it's based on what we see and the observations at the time of the inspection, and that determines the level of coverage based under the PC rule. Did I answer your question?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. The next question I have, based on current inspections, what are the most challenging components of compliance? So
I think the hazard analysis, and Tom, if you can weigh in as appropriate, a lot of times is knowing the hazards and, food safety plan, sanitation, and, swabbing, I think is a lot, getting that risk-based approach to swabbing. So Tom, if you can chime in too.
Yeah, I'll just say that's a very broad question. And I would say probably from my perspective as an investigator that it's really the technical challenges with things like validation. And that's why, like FDA, we do have the technical assistance network available. So I would encourage anybody who has those technical questions, is this validation, is this process scientifically valid? Use the FDA's technical assistance network to reach out and get those answers. Like a lot of the things we're already familiar with, things like sanitation, those might be simple concepts. But then once you get into cooking, processing, and acidifying, and cooling, and things like that, we have of course the universities and the resources, but also definitely make sure to reach out to the technical assistance network for those questions, because that'll come into play, as we go further into whether this firm is in compliance or not.
Next up, are all inspectors who are conducting limited in-scope PC inspections fully trained PC inspectors?
So not necessarily. There is a full limited scope. People who do PC inspection have gone through the entire training and are fully PC trained. There's a specific course that FDA holds it's called the PC Regulator course. And those are those individuals that have taken those courses do full scope PC inspections. The people that have not taken that training and have done the the other type of, they haven't had that training, they can do those limited scope PC inspections. However, if they come into a situation, again, where they feel that the findings are significant, what they do is they'll call in, or they'll ask the division to provide them somebody who is fully trained in PC.
Okay. The next question I have, what do you see as the best way that NECAFS can support improving PC compliance with small processor inspections?
So I think, outreach and training and, things like that, I think that's important. I think a lot of the small processors, having that information readily available, being available to them to assist them with compliance is key. Because a lot of the smaller processors are unfamiliar with the regulations, and it's hard for them to get that type of training.
Mm-hmm. Is there any update on when the remaining chapters of the Hazard Analysis and Risk-Based Preventive Controls for Human Food Guidance for Industry will be released? So chapters 7 through 14.
I don't have that information. Tom, do you have any? Are you in tune to that at all?
Yeah, I've been working on these chapters. So they are in progress. They are being worked on. But there's a long review process for each of them. So I can't either tell you when they'll be released, but we are still actively working on them, and they'll be published when they're ready.
Great.
But in the meantime, again, use the FDA's Technical Assistance Network. I know I use it all the time during inspections, and they're very quick about getting back to me with a lot of those technical questions. So if you do have something, and usually the guide is not going to cover every specific scenario, so definitely reach out if you have those questions.
Thank you. Based on your experience, have you started to conduct inspections at small processors? And if so, have you found that these facilities properly filed the attestation appropriately?
I can't answer that, but yes, I can say that we are inspecting the small processors. As you know, it was a staggered rule, and at this point, all people need to comply with the regulation. So we are just getting into the small businesses. So we don't have that many people that have attestations filed with FDA. But if we do find a facility that seems to fall under the attestation, we will encourage them. A lot of the small processors, it's more of, educate before you regulate. So if we find that they are a small processor, we'll encourage them to file an attestation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My next question, you mentioned that you're seeing issues with sanitation and swabbing. Do you think that has to do with the rules saying that it has to be quote unquote visually clean?
No, not necessarily. I think what we are finding is that with the food safety plan and the areas that they're swabbing, and then issues with finding positive results, and then not vectoring out and not realizing what type of corrective action needs to be taken to, clean the process, and then, redo some swabbing and try and really eradicate and do a root cause analysis of what caused, a positive finding.
Laura, can I just ask another question? You're talking specifically with ready-to-eat foods that have the swabbing components. So just to make sure I understand, the issue is not just swabbing, but having the processors understand the actual protocol and execution of what happens when you get a positive and how to correct what appropriate corrective actions are. That's what the issue is.
Yeah, we have a very good guidance document on that people should be referring to.
You're referring to the FDA's ready-to-eat listeria swabbing guidance?
Okay. Exactly. Yep.
The next question I
just
have.
want to clarify something. It says, you're saying the rule says it only has to be visually clean. I think we should make the distinction that might be more for allergen control. But as far as, for sanitation controls, you'd have to clean and sanitize, and of course verify through swabbing. So I'm not sure why she's saying the rule says it only.
I guess that would be. Can you show us explicitly where in the regulation that it says that you must swab, because the PCQI curricula? That's what I was going to ask again. Yeah. This would be a really interesting clarification for us as educators, because since you cannot use microbial swabbing to validate that something is free of pathogens, the curricula and instructions that we were given didn't indicate that. And the only way that, the only one area where we advocate that processors need to swab for microbial testing, specifically for Listeria, is for ready-to-eat products. Am I capturing this, educators in the room?
I would agree.
Yeah, so yeah, you're correct. For ready-to-eat products, the requirement is that they have sanitation controls, and it has to be verified through environmental swabbing, not validated, but verified.
Right, correct, excuse me. But in terms of, I think there was a or point of clarification that we wanted, because I think we were thinking that you were stating that they needed to have microbial swab testing to support their sanitation program.
No. So, because you asked what was I seeing? So, when it comes to issues that we have seen during our inspections, that was one of the issues that we had seen. So, it's not specific across the board, but we have seen, in regards to when we find positive findings, positive Listeria findings or environmental findings, that was one of the issues. So I didn't want to make it across the board that everybody had to do it. It was just yep.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
All right. And that is excellent timing, because that wraps up our time for Q&A. If folks have questions, I would definitely recommend bringing them up in networking later today. For now, we're going to move on to the needs assessment presented by Andrea Gilbert. So Andrea is a graduate assistant at the University of Maryland, College Park's Department of Nutrition and Food Science. And she'll be speaking now. Thank you, Andrea. Oh, Andrea, I don't think we can hear you if you're speaking at the moment.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Yep,
okay,
thank you.
Great. All right. So this mic is noise canceling. It sometimes gets loud in my neighborhood. So in the interest of time, this presentation will be slightly abridged from the full presentation I gave last year on the needs assessment. This presentation will instead focus on this presentation will instead focus on some key differences that I have seen in analyzing the data and questions about the next steps for this survey. So with that, I will share my screen and get started. Okay, so this is the awareness and knowledge survey that we sent out during the second half of 2019. And so I'll be reviewing some key findings from that as well as the next steps. So in the survey, we received over 100 complete and partial responses. The survey was available from August 16th to December 31st of 2019. And we received responses from all 12 NECAFS states. So for responder occupation and location, we had highest responses from Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and New York. And then our most common professions for survey responders were consulting, extension, and then regulator. If you combine both federal and state regulator, we had 14 of those. And then we had some people who worked with incubators and shared kitchens, either shared kitchen ownership or shared kitchen management. Excuse me. So for most of the responders, at least we had the highest number of responders saying that they worked with small businesses and then very small businesses, as well as farms expanding to sell value-added products and businesses not yet selling products, which are the target businesses for NECAFS outreach. So that was very useful. And then we asked out of our responders if they conducted one-on-one or small group advice or assistance activities to help with small and very small food processors in their regulatory compliance. And most people did not do a lot of one-on-one work, but they either did it as part of their job responsibility or they referred processors to people who did. There were about 10 of our responders did say that they did not actively advise or assist food processors. And then people had between an average to high level of knowledge for the requirements for small and very small food processors and the preventive controls for human food rule. We also asked questions specifically of the FSPCA PCQI lead instructors. So 41% of the survey responders were lead instructors. These were 24 complete responses out of 62 complete responses. And so questions were asked of these participants only, and I've selected a few. So we asked, when teaching the PCQI course, which sections do you think are more challenging for small and very small food processors to understand and implement? And so the top three were validation procedures, hazard analysis, and verification procedures. And this has come up in previous presentations. Validation and verification are going to be changed in the new curriculum, which is encouraging to see. And then hazard analysis also came up in the FDA presentation as an issue or an area for greater improvement. Okay. Then we had asked, among small and very small processors who had taken the PCQI course, to what extent do you think that they will make progress on developing a food safety system and writing a food safety plan? And so about half of the people, lead instructors said about half of the people who've come to them have started to write a plan that is only moderately complete. So they are aware that they need to do something, but they need more assistance on the next steps. And then they asked, to what extent do you feel that small and very small food processors would benefit from taking one or more of the following courses before taking the PCQI course? And so relating back to the hazard analysis point, they mostly suggested a course on risk-based identification of food safety hazards and a good manufacturing practices course. So we had more detailed long-form questions about awareness, knowledge, and progress towards compliance with the preventive controls for human food rule. And this is where I was able to pull out some isolated trends that I think are worth examining for future steps. So for these following slides, I have separated out the response percentages for lead instructors, the 24 lead instructors, and then the regulators. I isolated these two groups because there is no overlap between them. Lead instructors were mostly either consultants or extension professionals, and then regulators, 14 state and 1 federal, had no interaction, did not teach the FSPCA PCQI course as a lead instructor, at least. So there were some differences that will be seen in the next few slides. So to what extent do you think small and very small food processors you work with are aware of the requirements and the preventive controls for human food rule? And so in general, survey responders rated the processors as overwhelmingly average or below average. Lead instructors had them closer to average. Regulators had the processors as very much below average to no awareness at all or a little bit above that. Okay. Then we had asked, to what extent do you think small or very small food processors you work with are knowledgeable of the basic food safety and sanitation procedures as they relate to good manufacturing practices? So there was also Not as strong on this one. All of them consistently, like with the main group, rated processors as being below average on their awareness, but still a good chunk of them, about a third, said that they had about exactly average awareness of GMPs. But lead instructors had more people being below average, more strongly below average, and then regulators had people more closely bunched to being average. Then we had asked, to what extent do you think small and very small processors are knowledgeable with risk-based preventive controls approaches for conducting a hazard analysis and implementing preventive controls for food safety hazards and writing a food safety plan? And so there was a marked difference between regulators and lead instructors. Lead instructors had a larger percentage of their responses grouped toward average, whereas regulators had a much stronger responses trending towards no awareness or very low awareness. And so I think it's worthwhile to further examine this and understand that if lead instructors, this to me suggests that lead instructors are interacting with a very different group of processors as compared to regulators. So then we moved on to perception of processor challenges and barriers. So again, the responses are broken out by lead instructors and then regulators. And so we had asked, how important do you think the following challenges for achieving preventive controls for human foods compliance are for small and very small processors? So things followed the general trend in terms of ranking for both instructors and regulators. However, for regulators, they all viewed these challenges as being not as challenging overall. So you had a higher proportion of moderately or somewhat challenging as compared to instructors and compared to the general group. For monetary challenges, the same trend can be seen. The rankings are roughly the same, but the general responders viewed cost of hiring additional workers to manage a food safety program and cost of paying consultants as being higher than instructors, but only slightly higher, but substantially higher than regulators. And then we asked about training challenges. This one was slightly different, where regulators had slightly different opinions from the general group on what the three most challenging were. But instructors had lower opinions on the significance of of training challenges. Their numbers were significantly lower than both regulators and the general group, but they did follow the same overall trend. And then this was a question on other food safety courses. We asked responders, had they taken the following courses listed on this column, and whether or not they were instructors for the following courses on this column. And then this whole slide is ranked by very helpful responses from the general group. So similar to before, the rankings tended to follow. The top three responses for most helpful courses were the same for lead instructors. There's about a four-way tie for regulators, but I think the most important thing to note on this slide is that it appears regulators are not as enthusiastic about training as compared to the general group. And so getting in and exploring that and seeing how to improve training or to see what the greatest issues with current training are from a regulator perspective could be valuable. So I left this presentation a little bit shorter because I wanted to have a longer question and answer. So these were the three questions I sort of isolated from this abridged survey, which are: what are the best ways to improve compliance and understanding of the regulation? how best to reach processors who are less well prepared for compliance with the regulation. From all of my analysis, I've seen that it appears that lead instructors may be interacting with an entirely different group of food processors as compared to regulators. And so that explains the differences in opinion. And then how will changes in the Food Safety and Preventive Controls Alliance curriculum improve opinions on training from a regulator standpoint? All right, and with that, let's see. I'd like to see if there are any questions in the chat, or if anybody has any questions or comments. You all can just unmute yourselves and speak out.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and I'll give the chat a minute or two to see what shakes out.
Right, so we have a question in the chat from Amanda directed at Lori and Thomas. Do the results presented align with your field work specific to small processors? Part of the challenge we have at NECAFS is accessing small and very small processors. Food safety communicators in general have programming, technical support, or trainings available, but reaching this audience has been a challenge. We have a discussion in this group tomorrow in our Awareness PC subgroup. We welcome all to provide input on this effort during the discussion tomorrow morning.
Hi, this is Tom. I don't know if Lori is still on the call, but as far as if it aligns with our field work specific to small processors, you know, I'd have to think about that a little bit, but we experience the exact same challenges, you know, with sort of getting people to come into compliance. But that being said, there are small processors who are really interested in doing the right thing, and they try as hard as they can, and they make it happen. And there are other small processors who, you know, they don't believe in doing the right thing. So that's kind of like the crux of it all. But yeah, I mean, we just have to keep on trying. We go out there and we do our inspection. We try to explain it to them as best we can. And, you know, our approach is how is this going to impact public health? We don't necessarily care if, you know, the records aren't perfect or you haven't signed your food safety plan. We look at, are the controls in place? Are controls being implemented? You know, are you cleaning between allergens? You know, we're not going to say, oh, like you only took 5 swabs instead of 150. You know, we need to really do a good risk analysis specific to the company and to the product, and to, you know, how it's being stored, how it's being packaged. It's really on a case-by-case basis. Some things that might be a major public health problem in one facility might not in another facility. So we have those same challenges, and we are, you know, always trying to figure out like the best way to communicate and do outreach, just like you all are. So sorry if that's not a great answer to your question, but that's just kind of what I've seen. I've been doing the PC inspections for the past 3 or 4 years or so, since 2017. So that's what I got for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a comment in the chat from Carrie Collegian. She says, I was able to get a list of all the dairy processor permits from PDA and send out direct communication by mail to reach all our processors, including the Amish and small processors that don't spend a lot of time on the internet following the regs. And so I just wanted to know, has anybody else had any successful strategies for reaching the processors that do not typically come to extension or come to trainings or actively seek out webinars and the like?
we've done this for so long. I think it's always going to be a challenge for the small processors that are out there. You know, there's always going to be the people out there who are new and they've started to create foods, and then all of a sudden they reach a point where they start to get noticed by regulators. And you know, of course, they're going to plead ignorance. I didn't know. And it's not to say that these people are trying to make bad food to start off with. I think a lot of times they just don't realize the fact that they need to have this training, or they don't realize the importance of it, nor do they realize the importance of having, you know, an established plan to control the safety of their products. And so it's just a challenge. And I think it's got to be, you know, as Carrie says, you know, whether it's mailings, internets, visits to different processors by the FDA or by the state regulators. And I think the state regulators really, for the most part, have probably the best handle on it, because they are visiting, for the most part, all of these, you know, these different processors. We've attained a list, and we've done mailings to off that state list that our state was gracious enough to provide us, where we've done, you know, we've sent postcards to them, because we know a lot of people aren't necessarily use the internet. And, you know, still, we don't get a lot of participation by those small processors in our various trainings. You know, it's always going to be difficult. I don't know if there's always going to be a set solution, but from our perspective, I think it's got to be where it's a multi-pronged approach in terms of outreach. You know, again, having the state, having the federal inspectors kind of making sure that these folks are doing training. You know, for us to do it, whether we're doing mailing, we're doing internet, you know, going out and visiting is always difficult if it can be done. I think we do it, but there's certainly a cost that's, you know, that goes along with that.
Thank you. And somewhat related to that, I noticed when I was isolating out the regulator population, the regulator group from the survey responders, we did not have as good, I'll just call it, coverage of state regulators. We only had 7 out of 12 NECAFS states, and a couple of lovely people from Manhattan, Kansas. And then I noticed for the lead instructors, because a lot more of them were either consultants or extension, they weren't restricted to just their state, in the way that a lot of state regulators are. And so I just wanted to ask the audience, do you think it would be worthwhile to try to ask for a broader sample of state regulators to see if there's a difference based on state, and to see what one state is doing successfully versus the others? Or do you think another thing worth pointing out is that a number of the state regulators did not work as closely with small processors as compared to lead instructors. Most lead instructors worked very closely with small processors, even when they weren't teaching, but a lot of the state regulators only made referrals. A lot of them did not appear to be inspectors.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that on the inspectors, the state inspectors, trying to get a more of a handle on, you know, what they're saying. Because I don't know what the other, you know, if anybody else wants to chime in here from any of the other states, but certainly I think one of the challenges has been as you know, this regulations come out, it's applied to a broader group than had before. You know, a lot of the companies, a lot of the small processors really fell under state inspection. The state inspectors weren't only hard for a guy who was just making a small amount of product, distributing, you know, more in a local area. But then as the regulation came into being, and there was, you know, pressure, you know, I think we find that a lot of times it's these guys who had maybe fallen under state inspection prior to, but now, you know, that this regulation has kind of been thrust upon them, they just didn't know or haven't known. And, you know, I think those are the hard ones to get. We've seen that with a number of the small processors in Pennsylvania that, you know, in the past, they just went along. They were, the state guy would go in and do the inspection of their operation, and, you know, they just continue on. And then all of a sudden now Now they've got to meet this higher regulation, and unless somebody's telling them they need to get it done, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. I don't know if anybody else has that same experience or that same observation. I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, hi, this is Tom. I would say that I've been seeing the exact same thing, and a lot of that has to do with FSMA. Prior to FSMA, the FDA districts could sort of decide, what was a workload. Like essentially, we would say, okay, like we're going to go inspect these places because we know they're of higher risk. They have maybe a questionable history, or a history of noncompliance. Then FSMA came out and it said the FDA has to essentially inspect everybody. So we have to go out and make sure we're getting into all of these places. And so, yeah, I've seen the same thing with things where, like, previously we might have said, okay, well, this is a bakery and a warehouse, so we can allocate this to the state. Now we're going out to do a preventive controls inspection at a bakery who has, for the past 10 years, have only seen their state inspector. And just, exactly as you've said. So yeah, I've seen that exact same thing, and that's definitely been a challenge.
And I think the bakeries are a great example because we've seen, especially in the some of the warning letters and 443s that have been issued, some of these bakeries, seem pretty nasty, And the fact is that probably nobody just they always assume that's bread, who cares,
Right.
They just go along, and then all of a sudden they get a real inspection, and it seems like it's crazy. And I'm not saying that's in the state of Pennsylvania or any place in the Northeast.
Oh no, we got bakery. The same, and it's always they have dough eyes, right? Heyo. It's just that they come to a PCQI class because someone told them, and it's always like the USDA told me I had to get here. Like, is a testament of not understanding the regulating component. But then we have found that when you get that type of profile of a bakery, they can't come up to speed to that course because they go in 0 to 60 and they're blown out. So thinking about those programs like a prerequisite before you get into a PCQI class has been helpful.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with a number of bakeries, and yeah, I don't know, it's a great challenge because it's these guys they come in and they should be there, they should be, because in fact they have they're not really doing great control in their from the raw to cook transmission. Allergens are an afterthought or not even a thought, and again these folks had worked for years under a local state inspector, and not to say that they got mice or stuff like that running all over the place. However, when you start to get into some of those smaller points of that, or the finer points of allergen control, allergen labeling, controlling of raw flour on the cook side of their operation, they're just probably not where they need to be.
So this is Dave. I was just going to comment on some of your notes there. And obviously when I go out and do my third-party audits, looking at whether or not the state or federal regulatory body has come by in the last year or two is something that we do look at and definitely weigh upon to see sort of what the relevance is of how they're looking at things, and ensuring that there are the pieces in the audits that are complying with what we need to do on our standard. And the standard that I'm referring to is SQF, so just to let you guys know. So definitely have been seeing that a lot. Recently just did a audit. I can't say any details of it, but it was for a dry mix manufacturer. They had an audit back in 2018. They're expecting another one in maybe about another year. And they definitely were in tune with looking at preventive controls in that. So that was really refreshing to see.
Thanks. Thanks, Dave. And relating back to a point by Carrie Collegian, Annie posted in the chat that for getting more processors, we filed a FOIA request and were able to get contact info for exempt facilities who had filed attestations. So this is great for getting small businesses that are somewhat aware of the regulation what other strategies have people had for businesses just starting out? And it seems that for a lot of instructors, a lot of students who come to PCQI courses are not fully aware that you need to fill out an attestation. So we have a lot of businesses and processors who are not aware of that as well.
This is Carrie Klugen. Can I just add something? Because we're talking about the PCQI training, and a lot of our smaller processors are exempt. And you get them into the PCQI training, and they are like a deer in the headlights. So one thing that I did is I actually created 2 one-day workshops geared towards the smaller processors. So the first one's really basics. We go over GMPs, prerequisites, basics of cleaning and sanitation. And the second day is kind of a really scaled back hazard analysis and preventive control for dairy processors, where we go through hazards, teach them how to do a hazard analysis and identify the preventive controls, but we don't go into nearly the depth of a PQCI training. So we at least get them started enough to do that risk assessment without getting overwhelmed with full PCQI training. So just looking at something scaled back, and I know Samuel Kane's doing some things similar to that for the small scale cheese maker. So I think we've got some other options, not just the totally in-depth PCQI training to reach this audience.
Kind of jumping off of that, I also developed a 1 hour and a 3 hour prerequisite course program for small and medium-sized processors with Amanda Kinchla. And basically the 1 hour just kind of is like an abbreviated detail of all the aspects that they can expect in the PCQI. The 3 hour goes a little bit more in depth and covers a chapter on attestations that we included at the end. And then they take the 3-day PCQI, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback about that program and how it's strengthened participant knowledge when it comes to the PCQI and makes them more confident in their ability to complete a food safety plan. So it's been really promising.
This is John Luker with New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets too. One of the things that we have done, obviously in New York State, we've got dual jurisdiction with FDA over all manufactured food facilities, as well as retail facilities. And a couple of years ago, we started conducting a survey, and it was really just to gain some information for our purposes on where people stood in terms of preventive controls for human foods. But in doing that, and we do that with each inspection that we do on a facility, a manufactured food facility, or at least once a year. What we found out, though, is that in doing that, it has also given some bits of education to the people that really don't have a clue what's going on, because we ask them about a PCQI. Do they have a PCQI person? And, if you get the deer in the headlights look, then our inspectors are instructed to go over a little bit of what that means with the people. So we're still doing it. It's our inspections take a while to get through the whole process, but we're typically in these places, at least once every year or every couple of years. But people change and such. So, that's something we're working on in New York State, and hopefully it's going to pay off in the long run.
Thank you. We have another comment in the chat. It says the very small businesses, as defined by 21 CFR 117, do not need to comply with preventive controls. So I like this approach as a regulator of having them not take the PCQI, but something more basic, and hopefully it covers attestations too. And I guess not quite. Oh, okay. So I think we're running out of time. So let's see. With that, please do not hesitate to contact me with more comments about the survey. I know I definitely want to get in more about regulators' opinions on training and why they seem to be lower than average responders and lead instructors. But with that, I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. So at this point, we have about a half hour for the poster session. If you want to head over to the poster hall section of the website, you'll be able to chat with people, as I said, and view posters. And then we've got a break for lunch, and we will be back at 1 o'clock for that. So I'll give everybody a brief reminder as lunch is winding down as well. But otherwise, I'll see everyone in the poster hall.